If you've ever stayed in a hotel alone, you know the feeling of unfamiliar silence. The way the air conditioner hums, the way the hallway echoes with distant footsteps, the way every creak and thump makes you wonder who or what might be on the other side of the wall. I used to love traveling for work, but after what happened to me in a hotel outside Nashville, I'll never look at those long, empty hallways the same way again. It was the fall of 2019, and I was in town for a conference. The company had booked me at a mid-range chain hotel. Nothing fancy but clean and quiet. I checked in late, after a long day of meetings and a delayed flight. The lobby was empty except for the night clerk, who barely looked up as I signed the paperwork. My room was on the 4th floor at the very end of the hall. I remember thinking how quiet the place was. No kids running around, no loud TVs, just the soft hum of the vending machines and the distant sound of an elevator bell. I wheeled my suitcase down the carpeted hallway, passing door after door, each one closed and silent. My room, 427, was the last on the left, right next to the emergency exit. The room itself was nothing special: 2 queen beds, a desk, a TV, and a window overlooking the parking lot. I unpacked, took a quick shower, and climbed into bed, exhausted. I left the TV on low for background noise and drifted off to sleep. I woke up sometime after midnight to the sound of footsteps in the hallway. At first, I thought it was just another guest coming in late, but the footsteps stopped right outside my door. I waited, holding my breath, but whoever it was didn't move on. Instead, I heard a soft rhythmic tapping, like someone gently knocking over and over. I sat up, heart pounding, and checked the peephole. The hallway was empty. I told myself it was just the building settling, or maybe the pipes, and tried to go back to sleep. But the tapping started again, louder this time. I got up, opened the door a crack, and looked out. The hallway was still empty, but I could feel a cold draft coming from the emergency exit at the end of the hall. I closed the door, locked it, and put the chain on. I lay awake for a long time, listening to the sounds of the hotel, the elevator, the ice machine, the occasional door slamming. Eventually, I must have fallen asleep because I woke up to sunlight streaming through the curtains. The next day was uneventful. I went to my meetings, grabbed dinner with some colleagues, and got back to the hotel around 10 p.m. The hallway was as quiet as ever. I noticed that the emergency exit door was propped open with a folded towel. I thought that was odd, but figured someone had gone out for a smoke and forgotten to close it. That night, the tapping started again this time. Right after I turned off the TV, it was louder, more insistent, like someone was knocking on the wall behind the headboard. I tried to ignore it, but it kept going, steady and relentless. I called the front desk and asked if there was any construction or maintenance going on. The clerk sounded bored. "No, sir. You're the only guest on that end of the floor tonight." That made my skin crawl. I hung up and turned on all the lights, checking the closet, the bathroom, even under the beds. Nothing. I tried to watch TV, but the tapping kept going, now mixed with what sounded like faint whispers coming from the vent above the desk. I'd barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the tapping, the whispers, the sound of footsteps in the hallway. At one point, I thought I saw a shadow move across the wall, but when I turned on the lamp, it was gone. The next morning, I went down to the lobby and asked to change rooms. The day clerk was sympathetic, but the hotel was fully booked for a wedding that weekend. "We can move you tomorrow," she said, "but for tonight, you'll have to stay put." I spent the day dreading the thought of going back to that room. I stayed out as late as I could, wandering the city, grabbing dinner at a crowded bar, anything to avoid being alone in that hotel. But eventually, I had to go back. That night, the atmosphere in the room felt different, heavier, colder. I double-checked the locks, closed the curtains tight, and left the bathroom light on. I tried to read, but the tapping started almost immediately, louder than ever. It sounded like it was coming from inside the walls, moving from one side of the room to the other. I put on my headphones and tried to drown it out, but the whispers crept in, soft and urgent. "Let me in," they seemed to say. "Let me in." I ripped off the headphones and sat up, heart racing. The tapping stopped. The room was silent, except for the sound of my own breathing. Then I heard the doorknob rattle. I froze, staring at the door as it shook, the chain straining against the frame. Someone or something was trying to get in. I grabbed my phone and dialed the front desk, whispering for help. The clerk said she'd send security up right away. The rattling stopped. I waited, clutching the phone, until I heard footsteps in the hallway. A security guard knocked, and I opened the door, shaking. He checked the hallway, the emergency exit, even the stairwell, but found nothing. "Probably just a prank," he said, but I could tell he didn't believe it. I barely slept the rest of the night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw shadows moving in the corners, heard whispers in the vents, felt cold air on my face. The next morning, I checked out early, skipping the last day of the conference. As I was leaving, the day clerk handed me a note. "This was left for you," she said. The note was written in shaky handwriting. "Room 427. Don't let them in." I never found out who wrote it. I never went back to that hotel. But sometimes, when I stay in a hotel alone, I still hear tapping in the walls, whispers in the vents, and I remember the room at the end of the hall waiting for someone to let them in. If you've ever worked in a hotel, you know every building has its secrets. I spent 2 years as a night auditor at a historic hotel in downtown Chicago. The place was beautiful marble floors, grand chandeliers, velvet curtains, but it was also old. And the older the building, the more stories it seemed to collect. Some were funny, some were sad, and some were the kind that made you double-check the locks before you went to sleep. The hotel had 12 floors, but the 6th was always a little different. The lights were dimmer, the air colder, and the guests who stayed there often complained about strange noises at night. There was one room in particular, room 614, that was always kept locked. The staff called it the dead room. No one ever stayed there, and the only time I saw anyone go in was when maintenance had to check the pipes or the wiring. One night, during a slow shift, I was sitting at the front desk when the phone rang. It was a guest on the 6th floor, a woman in room 610. She sounded nervous. "There's someone knocking on my door," she whispered. But when I looked through the peephole, no one's there. I checked the security cameras, but the hallway was empty. I told her I'd send security up to check, but by the time the guard got there, the knocking had stopped. The woman was shaken, but there was nothing we could do. A few hours later, another call came in, this time from room 612. Same story. Knocking at the door, no one in the hallway. The guard checked again, but found nothing. Around 3 a.m., I decided to take a walk up to the 6th floor myself. The elevator doors opened with a ding, and I stepped into the hallway. The air was cold, and the lights flickered overhead. I walked past 610 and 612, both doors closed and silent. When I reached 614, I stopped. The door was different from the others, older, with a heavy brass handle and a keyhole instead of a card reader. The number plate was tarnished, the paint around the frame chipped and peeling. I put my ear to the door and listened. At first, I heard nothing. Then faintly, I heard a sound, soft, rhythmic, like someone tapping on the inside of the door. I stepped back, heart pounding, and hurried back to the elevator. The next morning, I asked the day manager about room 614. She gave me a look and shook her head. "We don't talk about that room," she said. "It's been closed for years. Just leave it alone." But I couldn't leave it alone. Over the next few weeks, the calls from the 6th floor kept coming. Guests complained of cold spots, strange smells, and the sound of someone crying in the hallway late at night. Housekeeping started refusing to clean the rooms near 614 unless they went in pairs. One night, a new security guard, young, eager, and not yet spooked by the stories, decided to check out 614 for himself. He borrowed the old brass key from maintenance and went up after midnight. I watched on the cameras as he unlocked the door and stepped inside. For a few minutes, nothing happened. Then, the radio on my desk crackled. "You need to come up here." the guard said, his voice shaking. "There's something wrong with this room." I took the elevator up, my stomach in knots. When I reached 614, the door was ajar. The guard was standing in the middle of the room, pale and sweating. The room was empty, no furniture, no carpet, just bare floorboards and peeling wallpaper. But the air was freezing, and the walls were covered in scratches, as if someone had tried to claw their way out. In the corner, I saw a pile of old newspapers, yellowed and brittle. The top one was dated 1974. The headline read, "Hotel guest found dead in locked room." I picked it up and read the story. A woman had checked into room 614 and never checked out. The staff found her days later, the door locked from the inside, no sign of anyone else. The cause of death was never determined. The guard and I left the room, locking the door behind us. We didn't say a word on the way back down. After that night, the calls from the 6th floor stopped. The air felt lighter, the lights brighter. But I never forgot the feeling in that room, the cold, the silence, the sense that something was waiting just out of sight. A few months later, I left the hotel for a new job. On my last night, I walked past the 6th floor one more time. The door to 614 was still locked, the number plate still tarnished. I pressed my hand to the wood and whispered, "I hope you find peace." Sometimes, when I stay in a hotel, I check the floor plan, looking for rooms that don't seem to belong. I listen for tapping in the walls, for whispers in the vents. And I remember the locked room on the 6th floor, and the stories that old buildings never really let go. If you've ever worked the night shift at a hotel, you know the building feels different after midnight. The lobby empties out, the lights seem dimmer, and every sound echoes a little longer. I spent a year as a night manager at a small hotel off the interstate in Arizona. Most nights were quiet, but there was one guest I'll never forget, the one who never really checked out. It was late January, and the desert was colder than usual. The hotel was half empty. Just a few truckers, a family on a road trip, and a handful of regulars who always seemed to be passing through. Around 11 p.m., a man checked in mid-40s, clean-shaven, wearing a suit that looked a little too nice for our place. He signed the register as Mr. Gray, paid in cash, and asked for a room on the 2nd floor, far from the elevator. I gave him room 217, handed him the key card, and watched as he disappeared up the stairs, suitcase in hand. There was something about him that made me uneasy, maybe the way he never made eye contact, or the way he kept glancing over his shoulder. The rest of the night was uneventful. I did my rounds, restocked the coffee, and caught up on paperwork. Around 2 a.m., I noticed the security camera feed flicker. For a second, the hallway outside 217 went dark, then came back. I made a note to check the wiring in the morning. At 3:30, the phone at the front desk rang. It was Mr. Gray. His voice was flat, almost mechanical. "Can you send someone up?" "There's someone in the hallway. They keep knocking on my door." I checked the cameras, but the hallway was empty. I told him I'd send security, but we didn't have a guard on duty that night. I grabbed my flashlight and went up myself. The hallway was silent. The only sound was the hum of the vending machine at the far end. I knocked on 217. Mr. Gray opened the door a crack, his face pale and drawn. "Did you see them?" he whispered. I shook my head. "There's no one here, sir. Are you sure you're okay?" He nodded, but I could see his hand shaking. "They come every night," he said. "They never let me sleep." I offered to move him to another room, but he refused. "It won't help," he said. "They always find me." I went back downstairs, unsettled. The rest of the night passed slowly. I kept an eye on the cameras, but nothing happened. The next morning, housekeeping called down. "There's a problem with 217, the supervisor said. "The guest isn't answering, and the Do Not Disturb sign has been up all morning." I went up with the master key and knocked. No answer. I opened the door and found the room empty. The bed was made, the suitcase gone, but the window was open, letting in the cold desert air. On the nightstand was a note written in shaky handwriting. I tried to leave, but they won't let me go. I checked the security footage. Mr. Gray never left the room. No one came or went. It was as if he'd vanished into thin air. We called the police, but they found nothing, no fingerprints, no evidence of a struggle, nothing to explain how a grown man could disappear from a locked room. The only clue was the note, and the fact that the Do Not Disturb sign was still hanging on the door. After that, strange things started happening in 217. Guests complained of cold spots, of hearing footsteps in the hallway at night, of someone knocking on their door and whispering their name. Housekeeping refused to clean the room alone. Maintenance said the lights would flicker, the TV would turn on by itself, and sometimes the window would be wide open in the morning, no matter how many times they locked it. One night, a guest came down to the front desk shaking. "There's a man in my room," she said. "He's standing by the window, just staring at me." I ran up with the master key, but the room was empty. The guest was pale, her hands trembling. "He was right there," she insisted. "He said his name was Mr. Gray." After that, we stopped renting out 217. The manager said it was for renovations, but everyone knew the truth. The room was cursed, haunted by a guest who never really checked out. I left the hotel a few months later, but I still think about Mr. Gray. Sometimes, when I'm driving past that stretch of highway, I see a man standing by the side of the road, suitcase in hand, staring at the hotel. I wonder if he's still trying to leave, still looking for someone to help him escape. If you ever find yourself in a hotel room late at night and you hear someone knocking on your door, think twice before you answer. Because some guests never really leave, and some rooms are never truly empty.